The police discovered little Josie barely alive. Her mother and younger sister had been murdered.
Lynn showed extensive damage to the left side and back of the head, and then as a result of which was brain damage. The same for Megan. She had severe injuries to both sides of the head, and as a result there was brain damage.
The police had few clues. The murder weapon was not found, and there was never any conclusive forensic evidence. They needed help. This is a police model of the murder scene, which was used to probe Josie's delicate mind. It took months of hard work, and sometimes Josie found it hard to concentrate. But detectives needed her to relive that terrible day. She told them where the killer was standing, brandishing the murder weapon. The family were defenseless, and he demanded money. A photo-fit picture of a suspect put the police on the trail of Michael Stone, a local villain who had carried out an earlier hammer attack on another victim. He was arrested and sent to Canterbury prison. That's where the police got their first break. A prisoner told detectives that Stone had confessed to the murders. The two men had been in neighbouring cells. They'd talked to each other along a central heating pipe. That man, the key witness in the trial, was Damien Daly, a self-confessed criminal. He didn't want to be identified, but in a BBC interview, recorded on the condition that a donation was sent to Josie, he stood by his story.
I was sort of like intrigued to hear what he did have to say, even though it was sickening and frightening. Something was sort of like drawing me to the actual conversation of, you know, listening to it. But basically I didn't like what I was hearing. It was like being told a horror story.
Without the Daily evidence, Stone would not have been convicted. So for the police and the Crown Prosecution Service, it was a gamble which paid off. And they defend the right to use so-called prison cell confessions.
A witness of bad character is as capable of telling the truth as a witness of good character is of telling lies.
In the area of Kent where Stone lived, there'll be some relief at the jury's verdict. He had a dangerous reputation, and he was jailed for a knife attack on a former friend.
He went like that as I woke up and I put my hand up. A little scar on my hand, like, I blocked it and it twisted between me ribs. Went straight through me lung. Missed me artery by a quarter of an inch. If I hadn't put my hand up, it would have gone straight through my heart.
But the Russells were not so lucky as they strolled home one summer's evening in July 1996. Stone had two chances to prove his innocence. Now he must pay the price of the jury's verdict. Stephen Cape, BBC News.
The Bank of England has cut interest rates again by 1/4% to 4.5%. It's the sixth cut this year and comes at the end of a week in which there have been conflicting signals about the health of the economy.
Advertising is a cyclical business. 7 years of feast in which the trendy offices go up, followed by, one hopes, less than 7 years of famine. At Bartle Bogle Hegarty, things are not too bad yet. But can an interest rate cut make things better?
In as much as the interest rate continues to encourage businesses to invest and not to hold back from their innovation programs, things they were going to do to encourage, bringing new things to market, then yes, it will definitely help.
Not all this company's clients actually need much help. Audi had a good September. Car sales generally hit records. Again, though, lower interest rates do stimulate spending.
People who previously would have had stocks and shares that they would have looked to turn into cash to purchase for their vehicles, not really making that decision. But because of the extreme low interest rates which we currently have, we have seen an upturn in our finance business as people hold on to their stocks and shares to see them come back in the forthcoming months.
If economies were cars, though, most wouldn't be going very fast. Forecasts say Britain will grow at a tolerable 2.1% next year, but the other big economies won't do as well, growing below 2%. Japan will still be in reverse gear. Britain, it seems, is in pole position. If you believe the forecast, you might think there was no need to lower interest rates today. Of course, not everyone does believe the forecast, so think of the rate cut as an insurance policy. Indeed, insurance and reassurance are among the authorities' key instruments. Finance ministers will be issuing plenty of both when they gather in Washington this weekend.
There has been decisive action. We must now assess it. We are determined to do whatever we have to do to make sure these conditions for stability and growth are in place.
However encouraging the forecasts, or the will of the authorities to proactively manage the economy, there were more job cuts today. 1,100 at First Choice Holidays. The grim economic news isn't over yet. Evan Davis, BBC News.
Britain may lose the right to host the 2005 World Athletic Championships after the government scrapped the Pickett's Lock development in North London today. The total cost of the stadium had more than trebled, from 60 million to 220 million pounds. It's the latest in a string of unsuccessful British bids for major sporting events and may well end Britain's hopes of staging the Olympic Games in 2012.
A glitzy start to the World Athletics Championships 2 months ago in Canada. It's an event that attracts athletes, fans and attention, which is why London was keen to host the championships in 2005. A new stadium was planned for Pickett's Lock in North London, but its cost spiralled from £60 million 2 years ago to an estimated £220 million now. And today the project was cancelled, and the government is suggesting the games be moved to Sheffield instead.
We're committed to hosting the 2005 championships. We have an excellent offer to make the IAAF. Sheffield as the location, a congress in London and a legacy fund for young athletes across Britain.
It's the government's fault, I'm afraid. The fact is they were too late in putting the case together. They didn't decide who was going to pick up the final bill. They were over-optimistic in their assumptions. The bid was full of hope and not reality.
Like the fiasco surrounding Wembley's redevelopment, this is a setback for British sport. Tonight, there are growing fears that a bid to host the Olympic Games is now in jeopardy. This site was supposed to house a new and futuristic stadium. Instead, it will be remembered for the games that never happened. Britain's reputation among the governing bodies of world sport was already low, and today it's sinking even further. Adam Parsons, BBC News at Pickett's Lock in North London.
OK, it's just after 10:25. I'll be back a little later with an update on the day's headlines, but now we join our news teams across the UK. And the main news again tonight, a Russian airliner has exploded over the Black Sea, killing all 76 people on board. Washington says it was hit by a Ukrainian missile. Moscow says terrorists could be to blame. On Newsnight starting now over on BBC Two, but from the 10 o'clock news.